All right, we need to talk about what happened with the Ravensburger Q pre-order for Rise of the Floodborn fiasco. Complete fiasco. Just, oh my gosh. What could have gone wrong did go wrong. And man, now before we really get into it, we need to sort of talk about, we need to make this sort of disclaimer. Please don't like put the blame or get mad at or whatever of like the employees of Ravensburger who tried to fix this situation. This was a really high stress situation that it wasn't their fault, and we'll talk about why, but this was kind of the culmination of mistakes that Ravensburger has made with these releases so far. So we can't put the blame on them. They did their best. So much of this was out of their control. So if you're going to direct your anger, or believe me, I'm annoyed, but don't direct it at them. They tried their best. So let's sort of look at this statement that was released yesterday from Qair.com, which is what Ravensburger uses like as their online queue service. So if you join the online queue to try to get products, they do it through Qair. So let's kind of look through Qair statement here. Qair can confirm that we experienced an unprecedented challenge yesterday, meaning, what was that, Monday, when both our systems and the Ravensburger system were unexpectedly targeted by the most aggressive DDoS attack we have seen during yesterday's product launch. We'll discuss DDoS in a second. We have proactively provisioned architecture to accommodate more than 25 times the number of human beings, interesting wording there, that requested to join the queue. Our automatic network level bot protection successfully thwarted over 95% of the almost 5 million bot traffic requests from reaching our servers, prevented bots from joining the queue, prevented bots from being passed from the front of the queue to the Ravensburger site, and ensured that the orders that were placed were from real fans, not bots and scalpers as designed. It appears that the more measures we put in place to counter the traffic, the more aggressive the attack became. However, the ramp up in scale of the attack shortly after the queue opened did temporarily overload the originally provisioned cluster, and it did take us longer than we would have liked to safely and securely move the human visitors to a large cluster capable of showing pages to all visitors while the attack was ongoing. This did result in some visitors seeing an error page for several minutes while we migrated the traffic. We are committed to providing a smooth experience for all our customers and all our visitors. Our investigation continues. Lessons have been learned, and moving forward, we will ensure that our system is deployed for Ravensburger in a manner that protects our clients' web servers from DDoS attacks as well as our own, ensuring fair, secure, and smooth experience for all. And real quick, just want to say that why Breezy makes a really good point here. Says this type of communication is something most TCGs don't get. It sucks that happened. Every party involved and is trying to fix the issue. One day later, people are still being nasty. Okay, so brings up a good point that most TCGs don't get this kind of communication. Being someone who plays primarily Yu-Gi-Oh, I can tell you right now, Konami isn't this open about this sort of thing. If something like this would go wrong, you're not hearing from Konami. Magic the Gathering, a lot of players would say Wizards of the Coast aren't open a lot about this stuff. They really like to keep it close to the vest. So it is really nice that we're seeing Ravensburger and their associates be open about exactly what happened, which I give them a lot of credit. So to kind of go through what exactly they're talking about here. So if you were trying to get into the server, into the queue for the pre-orders, a couple things happen. One, you would either get some error message on the screen, and you wouldn't see anything. Two, you would join the queue, but it would say you're 80,000 people in line, and it would like pause, or it would just take forever, and sometimes you wouldn't able to get in. Or three, like the queue would just stay on calculating, and you wouldn't really progress either way. And throughout the day, there were a couple times where they had to sort of postpone the start of the queue because they were working on temporary things and fixes and stuff like that. And this happened while people were also in the queue, and this explains it. So when we're talking about a DDoS attack, all right, basically what's happening is there is like these bots, and they use the term bots in here. There are these bots that are programmed to automatically fill a shopping cart with a bunch of stuff and make the purchase. All right. And it's this automatic thing where it takes out the time consuming acts of selecting the item, putting it in the cart, checking out, putting in your debit card or credit card or whatever you're using, and making the purchase. All of that happens automatically like that. And if that's happening, there were 5 million bot traffic requests. So basically what's happening here is before anyone can make the purchase of anything, these bots are going in and basically buying up all the product as fast as they can. And a lot of scalpers basically are the ones who are programming these things to do this. And it causes a ton of traffic on the server, which means the server gets messed up. People aren't getting their products, which means you can't even get into the queue because of all this backup. And it's a whole mess. So according to Qair, they say our automatic network level bot protection successfully thwarted 95% of the almost 5 million bot traffic requests from reaching our servers, prevented bots from joining the queue, prevented bots from being passed from the front of the queue to the Ravensburger site, meaning that these bots were also like moving from the back of the line to the front of the line and getting in there quicker than anyone else is, and then making the purchase quicker than anyone else possibly could. One thing you can kind of compare this to, and this is a very typical scalping practice. If you remember when like the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X were coming out, this sort of thing was happening all the time. Bots were flooding into your Best Buys, your Targets, your Walmarts, your Microsoft Store, Sony, all that stuff, and they were buying up all the consoles. And then the scalpers that were programming them were selling them for ridiculous prices. That's what's happening here. And if you want to look at ridiculous prices, just look at the singles market right now. Granted, it's not as bad as the first chapter was, but it's still a problem. All right, so essentially, they tried their best. Remember, this isn't Amazon we're talking about. This isn't the biggest company in the world. It's not that Ravensburger is small, but it's not like they're a super mega company. All right, so they could only do so much to prevent this. And like it says here, the ramp up and scale of the attack shortly after and did overload the originally provisioned cluster. So even after, like you said, they thwarted almost 5 million bots essentially, or bot traffic, it ramped up again. That's the thing with how this technology works, is that it can adapt to these sort of things. It's very much like a virus almost. It can adapt to these things and get through it, and it makes this system of pre-ordering things online through a queue, things like that, very, very, very difficult, especially if you're a company that isn't properly prepared for it. Now, they did say that lessons have been learned, and they're going to essentially try something different moving forward, which is good, and hopefully that helps. But we need to talk about kind of the root of the problem. And again, it's not the tech people or programmers or things like that. Again, they tried their best. You can only do so much with a DDoS attack of 5 million bots. But this all starts with Ravensburger and how this release since launch day of the game has gone and their preparation of everything. So if we go back in time a little bit and we remember, the first chapter was incredibly underprinted, and that, you know, that was very much, we all knew this. We all knew it was underprinted, and we all knew that getting product was going to be difficult to get for the first chapter specifically. And you can almost kind of expect that when you're dealing with something with as much hype and familiarity and all that stuff like Lorcana and Disney. And people were thinking, okay, hopefully this sort of thing doesn't happen again. Hopefully that it was just a first chapter thing, and moving forward, a product will be more obtainable. What people didn't seem to realize is that these, like the first 2 or 3 sets, have been really pre-planned, and a lot of the printing of them sort of happened already. So it's safe to say that the printing of Rise of the Floodborn in terms of quantity was similar to the first chapter, and you're seeing that with the allocation and things like that. It seems like that the allocation for local game stores is incredibly random. Like, for example, my local game store got like a couple booster boxes, so they could only sell individual packs, but like they got a bunch of starter decks, and like that's it. So the allocation is really weird, and it has been since the launch of the game. But this all boils down to Ravensburger, and they've said this, they've admitted to this, completely underestimating what the demand would be. And when that happens and you are printing way under demand, like way under demand, you're seeing these situations like a huge DDoS attack on a pre-order website, local game stores not getting product, big box stores not getting product. The Target I live near, I haven't seen a single piece of Lorcana anything there, not even like the display they're on, nothing. And you get people mad, and it causes discourse, and it's just a big mess. And we've talked about this before with the first chapter release when that dropped. We talked about kind of how Ravensburger fumbled the bag with it. Well, we saw this. We should have seen this coming. Like, there were reports coming out from local game stores that are saying, hey, the allocation that we got for the first chapter, it's going to be similar or maybe even worse for Rise of the Floodborn. So we might run into this situation again. And lo and behold, we're running into this situation again, and we might run into it in the third set too. So it just kind of is what it is. Things are going to be more expensive. Like the singles market is out of control right now. There are cards that are like, that should be worth 50 cents that are selling for $20. It's ridiculous. You know, and I'm not going to be the guy to give financial advice, but man, I would so like try not to buy singles yet, especially with some of the bad cards. If there's a card in Lorcana that's like kind of good and it's like rare or higher, that card is priced to the moon at the moment, and it's frankly absurd. But anyway, bit of a tangent there. Like, so the way that Ravensburger is hoping to amend this, and we've kind of seen this with the first chapter, is there was a restock to local game stores for the first chapter, and then once that happened, the cost of boxes started coming way down. The cost of singles just completely crashed. Like, the Lorcana market just crashed. And and there's going to be a reprint of the first chapter coming out in the holiday season. Who knows when that's going to be, but Ravensburger said that's happening. So we hope that a similar thing happens with Rise of the Floodborn. And whatever the next set is, if this is going to be another similar situation where it's not printed to demand and this same thing happens all over again, then they're going to have to do it with that too. Looking into the future though, what I hope can happen is they saw how everything went this year with Lorcana, with the first handful of sets, and hopefully they just print more. I understand that printing for trading card games isn't as simple as it sounds. Like, it's not just like they have a bunch of printers in their office and they just print a bunch of cards and that's it. Like, no, they need to rent that space, and other trading card games rent similar spaces to that. Like, think of all the trading card games that are out there right now. Your Digimons, your One Pieces, your Flesh and Blood, obviously Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, all those things. All these cards need to be printed, and there's only so much space to actually do it. And Lorcana is trying to put itself in the conversation of top tier card game in the TCG sort of space, and they need to fight for that printing space as well. So who knows when this sort of thing is going to be figured out. Again, hopefully when future sets come out, because when you look at games like One Piece and Digimon and Dragon Ball Z, and even like Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and Magic to a certain extent, every time you go to most local game stores you go to, at least that I have, those card games are in stock. Whenever you go to a big box store like Target or Walmart, for the most part, if they have a good vendor, those card games are in stock. They're on the shelves. And right now, that is just not the case for Lorcana. Hopefully in the future it will be, because they figured out their distribution practices and how they can meet demand so that the game can be way more accessible. This game is just simply not very accessible right now. It might not be for a little bit, and which is a shame, because I feel like that's just not a good place for a newer card game to be. You want people to be able to play the game, and you know, I get there's no really big competitive scene yet. We're all working towards that, but I feel like before we can have a dependable competitive scene or judge pool or whatever, we need to get the supply and stock thing figured out. But yeah, that's essentially what happened with the pre-sale of Lorcana Rise of the Floodborn. Again, this was not on the people who are trying to fix it. This was the culmination of just poor judgment by Ravensburger as they tried to figure out how much cards they need for release. Hopefully they've learned from it. Hopefully that this will improve. But if there's one thing to be positive about, is that Ravensburger and their associates are being open and honest. So far, they've pretty much for the most part stuck by their word. When they said there'd be a restock, there was a restock, and then first chapter became way more accessible. Hopefully this reprint thing does happen. Hopefully they stick to their word with all these fixes too. I think they've done a good job in that regard. But yeah, I was in the queue for a while. I never actually got in. I would love to hear about your experience in the queue, if you even got into the queue this week. But yeah, so again, please be sure that we're not being like super toxic on the internet or whatever. It's okay to be upset and mad, and because this whole situation is frankly ridiculous, but let's try to at least be somewhat civil. Yeah, so let me know what your experience was like, and yeah, I'll see you on the next one. Later.